What's good, everybody? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Over Quota. Please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review if you haven't already. And like always, the J. David Group, which is my company, is sponsoring this podcast. We help founders and CEOs turn their startups into unicorns by introducing them to CROs and VPs of sales with track records of generating revenue, building teams, and scaling growth. This podcast is also now being sponsored by Allego. For all you sales leaders out there, have you ever absolutely nailed a sales training, or had a rep who killed a presentation that you just wished you recorded to be seen later by new hires or perhaps other members of the team? Well, that's just one of the things that Allego can do. Not only does it allow you to record the best content for practice, collaboration, and feedback, but it gives you a way to organize all of your best content in one place so it's easily accessible to help improve sales performance for everyone. Email me, web with two B's, at thejdavidgroup so I can personally introduce you to someone that will take great care of you. Now, my guest today is Jacob Dunlap. He's the CEO of Skaled Consulting, which helps emerging and enterprise companies accelerate growth by bringing in sales leadership, operations, and enablement experts who not only consult, but drive real business outcomes. He's also a limited partner at Stage 2 Capital, a venture capital fund that invests in early stage B2B software companies, led and backed by elite go-to-market professionals just like Jake. I should also mention that Jake has significant presence on LinkedIn, where he shares his knowledge and opinion on many sales-related topics. I'm excited to have him on. Jake, welcome to Over Quota.
And what's going on, man? I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, just reading that part of the intro to me I was excited to have you on, and then just reading what I wrote. I'm even more excited. I'm like,
Get ready, man. Get ready. We haven't even started yet.
That's right. I'm like, this is why I'm having him on. One of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, which we didn't talk about in the pre-interview weeks ago, as I started getting lost in your LinkedIn feed this morning in preparation, and noticing that, man, you, like I said, you have such a presence and clearly insightful and thoughtful information, which is why you have such a big following. But first question I want to ask before we get into what Skaled Consulting is you mentioned it was like a post that you put up 12 hours ago about mental fitness and mental health as it pertains to sales. And hold on, let me just pull it up real quick. It says, where is it? I don't have it. I thought I had it queued up, but I don't. But basically about mental health as it pertains to salespeople. Tell me about that. Give me your thoughts on that and how you, as a sales rep, were able to manage it, and now as a CEO, what you suggest.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I was actually doing a podcast, and it was talking about this, and what I realized really early on is stress comes, for me, I can't speak for everybody, but for me, from chaos, from the unknown, from not knowing, how to achieve a goal, right? Frustration, and I think and then kind of layer on top of that, you have rejection, and people saying you suck. Not really, but they're saying you suck, by not returning your calls. Yes. And what I found is, and I was fortunate, I had people who kind of taught me, right? This wasn't all just like intuitive. They taught me how to structure my day in a way that led to saying no stress would be ridiculous, but not a lot, and still being a top performer. And so what I talked about in that post, and just a very tactical takeaway for a lot of folks, is I ran my day very regimented. I knew that, what's my goal? What's my goal? What am I trying to achieve in the macro, in the month, in the quarter, in the year? And then I just reverse engineered my days to where I knew that if I did three, I was a full cycle rep. I had to prospect my own leads, close my own deals, and manage my own accounts. I was in an environment, I had to make 100 calls a day and have 2.5 hours of talk time every single day. And the only way to do that is with extreme discipline. And so, I came in and I had my time blocks. I had my prospecting time blocks. I had 3 or 4 a day, depending on the day. I had my times when I wanted to do most of my sales meetings. I had my time for proposals, and I had my time for like future planning. And I managed my day relentlessly to executing that plan. And when I was in those call blocks, there's a technique, and it's a training I attended I was at a company called Career Builder called Eat the Frog. And what it talked about is these gross things that you have to do in your day, like cold calling, right? You don't just nibble, you just take 3 big bites and then the frog's done. And so every day during that 1 hour, I had my tick sheet. And as soon as I got to 20, I ate the frog. I got up and took a 20-minute break, right? And I built in my breaks too. And so that alleviated the stress for me. I knew that if I just came in and executed my day, then I wouldn't have to worry about that. And that to me was a big takeaway. Something that like pretty much eliminated a lot of my like sales stress pretty much overnight once I started to develop that plan.
It's funny. I have something that I use just of my own sort of tenant, I guess, called eat your peas first. Because in growing up, when I would always wait to eat my peas, but by the time I ate my peas, they were cold, and it was just more worse, right?
Even worse.
Even worse. So that's something that I teach my kids too as well. I get them to eat broccoli, but I said, you got to eat your broccoli first, because if you eat it when it's cold, it's going to be that much worse. So that makes sense. Interesting when you talk about what I'm hearing you say about the discipline that you have and the regiment there is, as it pertains to stress being tied to the unknown. And when you're regimented, then I guess what you're saying is that you can control the controllables. And when you're in more control, then or at least when you feel like you're in more control, then the stress, at least personally for you, is lowered, right?
Yes, correct. And it's coupled with the other thing I talked about. I didn't talk about it in that post. Actually, maybe I'll do a post about that later. Is the other thing is acceptance. And what do I mean by the term acceptance? It's really interesting, man. Literally before yesterday, I don't know if I'd ever like really talked about these, and I've done hundreds of podcasts, but I just accepted, dude. The job is what it is, and I accepted it very early in my career. So I did telemarketing in college, and so I'd done sales for a while before I even graduated, and I just learned, like, if you're signing up and you want to get paid commission and you want to make the big bucks and you want to be whatever, that means you got to be able to take a punch, right? Like, you don't get paid the big bucks, or it'd be called customer service. If the job was information giving, then I'd pay you about a quarter of what I pay you now, salespeople. And so I accepted that, like, look, part of the job in sales is to deal with discomfort and lean into it. And I developed some like mechanisms and triggers that I was able to use that that would allow me to kind of get into the flow almost immediately. There's a visualization I use called a light, which is it's literally physically a light switch. And so in those uncomfortable moments, I hit the switch and then I'm in, and I'm like in that. And it's like, and everybody knows the moments. It's like when you get that feeling in their pit of your stomach, it never goes away fully. But the more that you lean into it, and every time you get that feeling, you address it, it then becomes easier and easier and easier. It's like calluses from doing pull-ups, right? Over time, it just gets easier and easier and easier to get uncomfortable and to have those conversations that aren't necessarily uncomfortable, but need to happen to allow for more free-flowing conversation. Whenever you know that you need to challenge this, or you need to say something, but you don't say anything, and then you get off the phone and you say, Jake, why didn't you say something? Why didn't you, that when they say, send me information, this is interesting, really, this is really cool, so I'll circulate internally that they're full of it. Why didn't you say anything? And I decided moving forward, I was 26 years old. I remember I was sitting in my cube. I decided I will trade 20 seconds of discomfort now for hours of wasting my time in the future. And those two things coupled together, the regimented day to day, and then having that discipline and acceptance of the job is the job, and creating ways to get uncomfortable in the micro moments to eliminate future stress, is what allowed me to be a top performer and probably be less stressed than most of my peers.
Let me ask you this, as your role now as a CEO, how do you handle the pressure, I'll say, of, especially again, as I look at your LinkedIn profile and being a thought leader, that everyone's coming to you for the answer, right? In other words, you're supposed to have the answer because you're the CEO. And that's, whether it's people that are on your team or perhaps people that you're reporting to, whether if you have a board of directors or something like that, right? Everybody's coming to you for the answer. How do you manage it now as the CEO with even much more pressure on you or much more responsibility?
I just don't look at it that way, man. I just don't. I don't feel it that way. I just don't feel pressure that way. These are all these are all choices that we choose to make. And when I chose to start a company and now have a payroll that's, look, we're a professional services company, right? So we haven't raised VC money, but, I have payroll that's in the millions now, right? And it is what it is. I chose this life, and I chose it because I wanted to do it. And I get to do what I love. I love talking about sales and helping company with sales every day, right? And I love that we've built a company of people that also love doing it. So, the stress, trust me, that there is stress. Just for me, it manifests maybe a little differently. Is again, I go back to the plan, dude. What's the plan? What's the plan? Do I need to be worried? Is this me being paranoid? Or, how far off on the plan are we? Or how far ahead on the plan are we? So we can make sure that we're going to kill it in 4 or 5 months. So I feel like, again, it goes back to, I think having the plan in place allows you to focus on execution and not worry, fear, and doubt, which I think are what causes so much stress for people. So, I just don't, I accept it, man. You sign up, you can choose. I could go choose to be a surfer in California too, right? I could go choose to go do whatever, but I chose this. And in every single situation in life, it's for every single one of you sellers, you are making a choice to book over a meeting and overbook yourself. You are making a choice to say yes to something. And I put that in that post, actually, I didn't mention that point. So if I made a choice to book over one of my cold call blocks, guess what? I stayed late that night, or I doubled down the next day. I didn't let a choice I made to disrupt my micro focus to disrupt my flow. And I think that mindset is something I carry with me as a CEO. It's like, is this what's most important? Where are we in our plan, and making sure I'm managing the business months out? And so then that way I can make my micro adjustments now to make sure we hit our numbers in 6 months. But it's, a lot of that is, how you run an efficient territory too, how you should at least.
Let me ask you this. How do you eat the frog now as the CEO? In other words, before it was breaking your days into call blocks and breaks and those types of things. What is that? What does eating the frog for you look like now?
For me, it's different. I think it's different for everyone based on your strengths. For me, it's like, it's a combination of budgets, and it's our project management tool for like different projects. So for me now, it's like, again, like I'll give a very real example, something in our business. We are moving toward departmental budgeting, right? I'm trying to move to zero-based budgeting, which means like every dollar is accounted for. That was a Q1 priority. I started the process in early December. I built out a project in Maven Link, which is our project management tool, that had all of our deadlines. And in bite-sized chunks, we selected a vendor. We've got the codes correct in QuickBooks. We have this. And guess what? We're starting deployment in the first week in March. So I've got time. I give you, what I tell everybody, everything can fit. I know everyone in a day, they're like, nothing, it can't all fit. There's too much. That's not true. Everything can fit if you change your time horizons. And too many people, because they're living so in the now and they're not expanding their time horizons, they're trying to do too much now. So for me, my eating of the frog is to make sure that I give myself enough time to eat it to where I'm not like rushing to do it at some future date. To me, it's the rushing that causes me the most stress, which is why I like to plan so far ahead. But to me, it's those types of activities. So the frog activities, I plan in advance to where I know I'm not going to be overwhelmed and have to eat a lot. It's more like now I've got to eat a lot of frogs. And so it's like, do you want to eat a lot of frogs in a panic and then be sick for 2 weeks? Or would you rather eat one frog every other day for 2 months? I don't know. Maybe there's advantages to both types of frog eating, but you get the point. Like it's just that those are the activities that I try to block, and I just give myself enough time and grace to do it to make sure I get it done.
Is that what you call, I think you heard, I'm not sure if you put it in a post or where I heard it from you, or maybe even been when we talked before, the 80-15-5, where you talk about 80% of your day is sort of working on immediate activity, 15% is, forget what it is actually.
15 is like midterm. So that's like in the quarter or like the next 6 months. And then 5% is long-term. And that's it, man. Your brain always has to be in that mode. I check my calendar just to like rearrange things, 4 times a day, probably of like, hey, guess what? That thing that I had planned for 2 weeks, that's not serving me now. Or that actually just got deprioritized, move it. Okay, again, going back to Maven, going back to our project management, I'm checking in on that. Okay, where am I doing in my timelines? Okay, now thinking about, look, we're in the beginning of 2021. I already have to start to think about how we're going to hit our 2022 number. And are we doing this? Are we doing one or two things today that are going to make our lives easier in Q3, Q4? So it's just, you always have to have a little bit. And that's where that is. 80% of your time is spent on the stuff that needs to get done now, 15 in that like midterm, and 5% on the short term. And if you do that, then you come into every month, every day, every quarter, every year running, because you've already been laying the groundwork as opposed to just getting started. And I think that's why so many reps live month to month, is they're not doing anything to set themselves up, like nurturing people on LinkedIn, making sure you're getting that. So when you come into September, you've got 3 or 4 meetings waiting for you. Mm-hmm. And too many reps are only focused on the now, not taking that time. And for me, I don't know if I thought of it or someone taught me it. I don't know, but I've always thought in that, okay, things feel good now. Now let me look at the next horizon. Now let me look at the next horizon. And then making sure I've got a plan and I'm doing small things today. Like that example I gave you, right? Mm-hmm. Because I started in December and I did the small things, we're going to easily get it done on time. Mm-hmm. Easily and early.
You and I, man, there's so many things I want to follow up on there. Just before I forget, when you say nurture, nurturing someone on LinkedIn, what does that look like on a practical level for you?
Yeah, again, if I was a rep, one, and I'll send you a link too, so they can get it. They can get a free 60 days of Sales Navigator.
Sure.
But you can put it for the people who want it. Mm-hmm. For me, Sales Navigator allows you to do is save a list of people, and then every morning you can come in and sort by lead shares and lead news. So imagine this. Imagine I'm trying to get a meeting with a VP, senior level person, not a VP in title, someone who's at 500,000 person company. You'll see executives get no love on LinkedIn because they keep resharing links and posts. So they get like no comments. It means I'm going to go comment on 2 or 3 of his posts. Go comment, slow play. And then he posts something that's relevant. Then I come over the top of the DM. That, I don't know, that wasn't in my, maybe I built those steps into a sequence, which you actually can do and should do. Mm-hmm. But guess what? That might be in June that he does it, might be in July, might be in May. I don't know. But if you've got enough of those small little balls and those it's a small little things that doing that comment took me 45 seconds. And if I do that a couple of times and then the timing is right, now in June, I get that meeting and now I'm 8% away to my goal because I spent 45 seconds in April, 45 seconds in May. And it's that mindset. What am I doing to create that future pipe for myself?
And when you look at leadership, you mentioned sales reps, but leaders who are struggling or the teams are struggling, oftentimes it's the same thing, right? In other words,
It's identical.
Yep.
That's your job as a leader. Your job as a leader is to not let your people feel the pressure. Mm-hmm. That is your number one job as a leader, is to not let your people feel the pressure and to encourage them to think about the month ahead, the quarter ahead, and the year ahead, and to help them to plan accordingly. You might be feeling the pressure, but that's your job. You get paid to not transfer pressure down the chain.
Tell me about, I usually get into this first, but just again, so all the things that you were talked about in your post, I wanted to talk about. But yeah. Tell me about Skaled Consulting. I mentioned it in the beginning, but give us the value proposition there and how you help companies. And then also I have a question about the VP of operations that you and I talked about before.
Yeah, sure. So it's good. I like getting into it maybe in the middle, right? So if you've made it this far, you're like, all right, maybe I'm into this. So we're a sales consulting company. We've got about 30 people all over the world. And what we're usually doing, the way you describe it's fairly accurate. It's, we're coming in with growth stage companies, helping them to get through those initial phases of scaling, which is really just by adding in either a mix of strategic or tactical, like interim resources. So, similar to what your business, what we do is a lot of part-time sales operations as a service, and sales enablement as a service, sales leadership as a service, right? So imagine being able to put the exact right scaling team in place as you go through these stages. And then we've got the tactical people where maybe you've got the right strategy that you just need playbooks or whatever it is. So that's what we do at the kind of the early stage. And then later stage, companies are trying to modernize. So after working with, 800-900 of the fastest growing companies in the world, I think we have a very unique lens on how now we can apply that change management framework to much larger companies. So now we have big global 2000 companies that we work with where we're doing projects with them where they're trying to modernize. They're trying to move away from the force management, the Sandler training, these methodologies that have been around when the buyer behavior was much different, because that's really what's happened, right? Is buyer behavior has changed dramatically. They have so much more information, and we've been saying they do, but they really do now. And if you're not re-engineering your sales process as a larger company to meet buyers where they are today, you're in a lot of trouble in the next 5 to 10 years. Your sellers need to learn how to engage digitally. Most of these field reps don't know how to do it, right? They're used to being face-to-face golfing, drinking wine and steaks, right? They don't know how to actually create a relationship digitally, right? And we talked about some ways to do that a little bit ago. But for these bigger companies, a lot of what we're doing is partnering with their internal teams, their readiness, their enablement teams, and helping to lead strategic projects around, overhauling their outbound process or their inbound workflow process, overhauling their sales process or methodology, and really implementing a custom solution for their business and their buyer versus this one size fits all world that these old school methodologies lived in.
You and I talked about prioritizing initiatives previously to this conversation. And you mentioned one of your big initiatives was hiring a VP of operations. Where are you with that? Have you done that or?
No, we just talked a few weeks ago. Yeah. I think the key is, as you're scaling, you've got to know where you're strong at. And again, I've had to become strong operationally, but it's not where I'm going to naturally gravitate, right? There's people, it's funny, when we talked about Eat the Frog, it was a perfect segue.
Yeah, right.
It's like, there are people that love that. They're like, I just want to stare at budgets all day. And I want to stare at a project management tool all day. That's the role I'm hiring for. So if you know somebody, and by the time this airs, please hit me up. But I think that that's part of it. As you grow and as you scale, you've got to retrofit your org. But it's the same way. Look, if you're a rep or you're a manager, you've got to retrofit your own skill sets. And you need to improve in certain areas or get better in certain areas, to make sure that you're growing both as an individual and now it's at a larger scale when you're growing as a company. But the concept is similar, right? Wherever you're not great, you either need to get good at it or find someone else who's great at it already.
What percentage of the companies that you work with, or just, I guess, generally speaking, whether you're working with them or not working with them, have what you would call modernized sales approach and philosophy to their marketplace?
15%, maybe 10%, maybe 10, 15. And I'll try to define that too. Just like I'm like doing some like quick scoring criteria in my head of like, well, what equals modern and who are all these companies? Yes. I think there's a few key variables. Step one is sales technology. It's not necessarily, and this isn't necessarily in any order. Most organizations, by my best, and this is a guesstimate, my best guesstimate is companies are using probably 25 to 30% of what their sales tools are capable of, because their sales operations teams have only used these tools a few times, and these tools are evolving so quickly. I think most organizations, if they did nothing, they didn't hire a single person, they just optimized their tech stack, could probably get a 10 to 20% lift in revenue. Just because their team is doing so much stuff manually that VPs of sales from 10 years ago could not imagine that you can automate behind the scenes today. And so if you're a VP of sales and you're not staying on top of your game and you're not realizing, you think you know what these tools can do, I promise you probably don't. You probably have created a lot of manual stuff because you're doing what your dad did and what his mom did before you. And we're just repeating the sins of the father, right? Like as sales leaders. So sales technology is one. And then the next is sales process, that we have to reverse engineer from an ideal customer experience, not from a sales like how many leaders, and I want you all to be on, and sales reps, this is for you, this is for managers. How many of you have mapped your customer journey from initial touch point to raving fan? How many? Not a lot. Therefore, how can you possibly architect the most effective revenue organization? From marketing through lead gen, through sales, through CS. You can't. And so that to me is what also is, are you customer centric? Or have you thought about that? And even though these people might report to different people, you've created incentives that don't disincentivize. Right now, a lot of organizations, marketing is compensated on an SQL, which the SDRs are like, half of these are junk. The SDRs are compensated on qualified meetings, and the AEs are like, half of these are junk. The AEs are quantified on closed contracts, and the CS reps go, half of these shouldn't have been sold or got sold the bill of dreams. That is the dysfunction we have created right now between our sales organization and marketing organization. So when I say the top 10 or 15%, they've broken down those walls, right? They're all aligned around revenue or some clear through line across departments. And they're acting on behalf of what's best for the customer as well as what's best for the organization, versus flipping that and what's best for the organization first and what's best for the customer second.
How do you, if they haven't done that, and likely that most people haven't, just given the way that you presented that, how do you go about even starting to begin to map the entire customer journey? If you haven't done it before, where do you, and I'm assuming that, speaking of assuming, that you're making assumptions of what the ideal customer journey might look like to a certain extent, or not. I don't know.
Yeah, it depends. It depends on how much data you have, right? I think it's the most beautiful way is if you have enough data, and then you can just go work it backward. You can go, hey, my top 20 customers, the people that love our product, they're using it, those things. What was their path? How did they do it? The deals that closed the fastest, the deals that converted quickly between stages. I guess that's kind of the same thing, but you get what I'm saying? The data is probably there. We use a tool. We're an implementation partner of a tool called Insight Squared, for example. Shout out to those folks. I love Insight Squared. And what it does is it allows me to go in and allows our firm to go in and say, what's our average conversion percentage by stage, by manager, by team, by industry, et cetera. And you can go and chop this data up, and then you start to see the patterns. Oh, the best fit customers, they do this thing. The worst, and then you go and look and then do the reverse exercise. Now go look at the top 20 customers that churned last year. What was their path? What happened? And I think by just doing that, you're going to come away with some very clear patterns, right? And I'm going to get, and by the way, I'm going to give you a spoiler alert. I'm already going to tell you where the mess up is. It's the handoffs between groups and over-promising in sales and over-promising in CS. That sales doesn't set the customer up for success because they don't get enough information to know the potential roadblocks. Then that information doesn't get transferred correctly, and it doesn't get fully integrated then into the customer's day-to-day, and then they churn. And where the breakdown happens is a little bit different, but that is some of the more common reasons it happens.
You alluded to cross-functional cooperation, I guess, earlier. In that case that you just mentioned, where sales is maybe not setting the right expectation, maybe over-promising, what do you do to fix that during the sales process? Does that mean involve customer success?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. A good functioning organization involves CS toward the very end of the process. And it's why, for me as a sales leader, I never ran a sales org where I didn't also run account management in CS. And I would never do it. Why? Because then right now, just imagine when you have a sales leader who's comped on one thing and an account management leader who's comped on another. It's just this constant. I mean, I can't tell you how behind closed doors, how many account management leaders I've talked to. And here's their view on sales. Yeah, no, it's great. No, yeah, we've got to go back and resell sometimes and set expectations. I'm telling you, this is a challenge, all of you. Go to your CS team and see if what I'm saying is true or not. It's why for me, I couldn't imagine being a revenue leader and not, because then I can always do what's right for the customer. I can say, you know what, we should just be taking down a small deal now so we can land and expand it. But now imagine if I don't get incentivized on that. I'm going to try to push to get this big deal that may be too much right now, or I just lose the deal on its own because I don't see any residual commission from it. So just think about all these perverse incentives we've created with all this because I don't think by default specialization has to be bad, but I do believe that when you create incentive structures that disincentivize the correct behaviors, that you're going to have that these issues come up, and it's really tough to stop them.
How do you improve the top of the funnel stuff then, right? When you're talking about marketing to
Yeah.
BDR to BDR to AE, what's the, because with bringing in customer success in at the end, I feel like that's more natural in a way, more seamless in a way than it is where, I don't know, the BDR on their initial call, let's just say, is doing the qualification. That's what they're there for, right? And then to hand it off to the AE, how do you make it so that they're more aligned and working better together?
It's the same thing. Like, I think they should all be reporting to the same person, and that
Mm.
like immediately what are you doing? Again, when these people report to the same person, now what magically happens? Like, you're incentivized to do the right thing for all groups, right? And then therefore that ultimately becomes what happens to the, what's best for the customer a lot of the time too.
Mm.
So there's a couple of things. One is aligning part of either the marketing, or a part of marketing and sales development comp to revenue, right? Almost every, no, not almost. Is there an outlier? I'm sure there's an outlier. Of recent conversations I've had, every single team that I've talked to that has a high functioning marketing and sales relationship, marketing is almost 100% tied to revenue, not to leads, not to what MQLs or SQLs, to revenue. So marketing not being tied to revenue is probably the easiest thing to fix. It's not necessarily easy because you might get a marketing leader who's like, that's not fair or whatever. And then the same thing with the SDRs, that the SDRs, I think having a percent of their compensation tied to revenue also helps to incentivize the right behavior to some extent. So I think if you align people around the ultimate goal of revenue, and then at the end of the day, really, what is the goal of a sales organization? It's actually to not sign contracts. I include account management in the sales organization. The goal of a company is to create power users, right? At the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do. We are power users / raving fans.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we should all be aligned on. The whole organization is we're going to generate revenue as step one, and then we create raving fans as step two. But that's the ultimate bar. Are they using the product successfully, and are they happy about it? And because if you get there, then they stay on for forever, and the lifetime value becomes, exponentially higher than what it could be if you just jammed a deal through. So I think that those are just some, I think, helpful ways to think about it from a comp standpoint.
What's your opinion on having the sales and marketing leader be the same person?
Skill set. I think it can work out really, really well or really bad. As long as, again, it goes back to as leaders, sometimes we've got to realize sales and marketing in the last 15 years has changed more than it probably had in the last 30 or 40, no, probably like 50 years or something, right? That because of, and a lot of this has to do with technology. So as long as you're thinking about how to build a modern marketing and sales organization versus how you maybe built it in the past, you're going to be fine. But I think a lot of it does depend on the individual. But I think it can work with the right individual who finds the right number twos for each group.
One of the things that you posted that I want to talk about, which I found interesting, is the post that you did when it said, I went from $0 on the board to $60 in new business the next month. And it was about making assumptions. Tell me about that.
Oh yeah, it was zero. Yeah, I did 60,000 in the next month. I just had to correct, just make sure we got it. It was 60,000, right?
Oh yeah, no, not yet. Exactly. Sorry, not 6,000.
I'm messing around. So you know what it was about? It wasn't necessarily about assumptions. It was about I had thought sales was an art and like almost pure art. And I had a leader who came to me, my director, so my boss's boss, and I hadn't closed anything. And I think he listened to one of my calls and he said, "Why aren't you following the script?" And I said, "The script? The script, Evan? Are you kidding me? I'm Jake Dunlap. I don't use scripts. I got the rapport." He's like, "Dude," he goes, "do you think that we train 1,000 salespeople on this process because it doesn't work and we're stupid?" And I was like, "No, probably not." He's like, "Exactly." He goes, "Just read the script." And I was like, "Fine. What else do I, whatever I was doing wasn't working. So might as well." And then sure enough, I'm like, "Oh my, wait, oh, this is how you should run a discovery. Like, oh, the order of operations of questions does matter.
Mm.
Oh, the way that you position it this way versus this way actually has a big impact. And I think that what's really taught me the science of a sales process and the nuances. I think maybe that's when I really started to like really love sales. Is like, I'm like, oh my gosh, man, sales is in the details. If I phrase a question like this versus like this, if I say this question before this question, it has a dramatic impact on the outcome.
Mm.
And so that was it for me, is like when I kind of drank the Kool-Aid, I immediately started crushing it.
Mm. Yeah, and you mentioned that, assume that you don't really know anything and approach it that way. And it's really about fact finding and to not necessarily, I think you said something to the effect of trying to make a sale on the first call. The goal is to get the next meeting. And if
That's
you
it, man.
approach it that way, yeah.
That's exactly it. Yeah. And I think that's it, is I prepped my face off.
Mm.
So I had a lot of things, but I also, and I also, again, I run a very structured discovery process, and I still, what we train organizations on today is a version of that, which is around understanding who's the right, like, who are you actually talking to and what does their group look like, the top priorities within that team and group, gaps, and then what are they doing today? And it's still a very similar, to me, it is there. A lot of people say, well, there's no right or wrong way to do this or that in sales. And I disagree. I actually think there is a right and a wrong way to do sales. And I think there's a right and a wrong way to ask questions, and a right and a wrong way of order of operations. And what I'm able to do, because I have those questions in the order, my mind is clear. Why so many reps suck at discovery is if our brain can't multitask. It sucks. If you're always trying to think of the next question you need to ask, you can't actively listen. So you're constantly not really listening, making assumptions. Whereas because I already know the next question I'm going to ask, I can focus on the answer. I can say, oh, hey, that was a little interesting. Tell me a little more. I can hear those. I can pick up on those nuances of tone or something. And I can, as opposed to like, I'm trying to formulate the next question in my head. And so it's those assumptions. A lot of these assumptions happen because we're not fully present in the moment, in the discovery. And so we make a lot of assumptions because we're almost working with incomplete information because we're not fully listening.
Interesting. Let me follow up on that. So it's funny, obviously doing this podcast, I often, I've changed it up a little bit now. So the document that you got is more general, but I used to send specific questions to each candidate, right? Or each candidate to each guest. But what happens with me is, and I always would tell everybody this, is that, there might be 15 questions on that sheet, but you are going to answer, say, the first question that I ask, if I even ask that, let's just say, and we might be 20 minutes into the conversation and I haven't even gotten to question 2 because I am listening, right? Because I feel like for me, and I tell my candidates this, by the way, going through the interview process, if they do have questions written, I said, do me a favor. I'm like, use that just sort of as almost a fallback, but I want you to be listening to what Jake is saying, because if you ask him a question like, what color is the sky? And Jake says it's blue, you don't want to just go to, okay, what'd you have for dinner last night? Or, you want to say like, well, why is it blue? Is it any other color besides blue? Those types of things. So, when somebody's in on a qualification call, let's just say, and you were talking about how your boss back then said follow the script, is that what you recommend? Is it that prescriptive where you have the set of questions written down, and then what is your recommendation? Let's say, for instance, if it is, and this is my, I guess, challenge, right, as a podcaster, when you have a limited amount of time, whether it's a half hour or an hour, right, and you have these questions that you've written down, and you're 5, 10, 15 minutes into it, and you realize that you have many more questions that are written down on that script, but you're doing a good job of listening and carrying the conversation. What do you do with those questions at that point? Or how do you ask those questions, but also follow up on what's actually being said in real time?
Man, it's such a good call out. Here's the thing. How many of you have had an instance where you hung up the phone, you go, oh, I forgot to ask this. Oh, I didn't ask this. And that's because your discovery. And I also want to maybe switch the language and the thought. I never have had a qualification call in my life. I've only had discovery calls. And when you go in with that mindset. My job is to discover, not to qualify or disqualify. It's just to let the chips fall, right? And step one is I understand your role. Okay, great. Hey, I work with lots of podcasters, whatever. What are your top 2 or 3 responsibilities? Okay, now I know where Jim is. Jim, yeah, tell me a little bit more about your team. Does this, now I know who's going to need to be involved in the next meetings. Okay, great. I can do that. What happens though is this. You ask somebody about their core areas of responsibility in their team, and then they start to launch into the challenges. They start to say, yeah, and we're growing, and I'm not really sure if we're going to be able to grow or scale. Our we don't really have any playbook, or our tech stack is a mess, and I've got 50 reps doing it 50 different ways, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to talk about that part in 3 questions, but I need to go deeper on the parts that I need to know now, which is who is this guy and what does his team look like? And what happens is when I call it, you just ping ponging, or you're like a rabbit with ADD. You're like, you miss the nuances, because then you get happy ears. You're like, oh, he has a challenge. Oh, I'm just going to jump ahead. I just write a note. Playbooks, scaling, 50 ways. And then I go to my next question. Okay, great. So it sounds like your team looks like this. Your team does this. This is who does this. Is that right? Fantastic. Okay, let's talk about departmental priorities. You mentioned, and then I use all that information that I gather as amazing lead-ins to the section when it's appropriate.
Got it.
And as opposed to going here, because and guess what? I don't hang up the phone forgetting all of the questions. Mm-hmm. I have the process, and I don't need to then go like, oh, he wanted to go here. Instead, I go, okay, great. Thank you. Note that for this part.
And when you say you note those for the appropriate sections, are you saying for the next meetings, or are you saying for the next part of the conversation, depending on how much time you have?
No, it would just be for the next point of the conversation. So as we go through, it's like, let's say again, they mention that they're already working with another training company or another consulting company. Mm-hmm. When I ask him about his role, for example, mm-hmm. I'm probably not going to bring that up for another 20 minutes. Because I still need to understand the departmental priorities and what that is. Whereas other people might, oh, so what are you working with them for? Mm-hmm. I don't give a shit. I'm trying to understand your business and where your business is trying to go, and what are the gaps and what you're trying to do to get there. The fact that you're working with a comp, I don't really care. That, like, I'm going to be let them do that. I'm going to be the person who's going to help you to increase your net new meetings by 8% next quarter.
How do you do that with managing the time, though? Right. In other words, let's say you have you that information that he or she is sharing with you is valuable for obvious reasons, but they've only blocked off 30 minutes, or they've only blocked off whatever it is, right? An hour, or let's say as a rep, you have another meeting that's coming up. How do you? You
have to pace. That's on you. I've never understood why people this is another one where you have the clock in front of you. Mm-hmm. You can see it. Why are you running up against the gun? Like, instead, it would be better to say, let's say we are having a good conversation and we're about 15 minutes of the way in, and I can see where we're headed. Mm-hmm. I might ask at that 15-minute point, hey, John, look, this is great. Do you have an extra 10? Mm-hmm. As opposed to with 2 minutes left. Right. You got to be able, it's just like a speech. Whenever you're doing a public speech, you got to pace yourself correctly. Right. And this comes from practice and being present and being aware. I can see my time. It's staring at me right here. So you just say, great. Do you have 10 minutes? So I think a lot of times you can do that if you can get extra time. And then if not, I'm just going to change my game plan. I'm going to say, okay, well, great. So what we'll do then for the rest of this call, since we've got a hard stop in 15, is I've got a few more details that I want to just work through. Then we're going to go through a high level just to see if there's alignment. And then we'll set up a call for maybe 2 weeks or maybe like 2 days from now, where we'll loop in the rest of the team. Does that work for you, John?
Right.
And now what did I just do there? I got the next meeting already confirmed. I said, we're going to loop in the rest of your team and we're good to go. That's all I wanted to do anyway. The whole goal of the first meeting is to get the second meeting or disqualify anyway. Right? So it's to me, this is all a pacing problem. And if you're one of those people, you're constantly up against the gun, that's your fault. It's not their fault. You should be able to look ahead and see that you're getting ready to go up against the gun, and make a decision, change something.
Well, I'm going to show you that I'm a really good listener, and because I don't, because I don't want to be up against the gun in the last 5 minutes that you and I have scheduled, which is perfect actually, because it's the rapid fire 5 questions where I ask you 5 questions, you give me 5 answers, and then we will close it out on time. How about that?
Cool. Let's do it.
Fantastic. Do you have a morning routine? If so, what is it?
Not really. No, I'm not a big morning routine person. Sometimes I have to take my kids to school. Sometimes I don't. But no, I've had fits and starts in my life where I have been, where I got into this 5 a.m. thing where I was like, how many days in a row? 44 days in a row or something. I got up at between 5 and 6 a.m. I was just like, God, I'm miserable. This sucks. I think I've realized as life goes on, I've always been, I think, more on the night owl side, that I do better with more sleep. And then I've actually been productive later into the night. But I think that's just more, but I think I've fought it for a lot of my life because everyone tells you you're supposed to be a morning person. So I don't have like a steadfast one. I wish I had like a better regimen. Again, but it depends. You might catch me in 3 months and I'm like, I'm all over it. And then I've got this really buttoned up routine if I feel like that might serve me at that point.
I'm actually pleasantly relieved, I guess, that you don't have a morning routine, because it shows that, success doesn't always have to come in the same package, which is,
exactly.
What are you most excited about right now, either actually both personally and professionally?
Personally, I have not been on a plane in almost a year, which for me, I was traveling probably 2 to 3 times a month. So I'm going on a ski trip here in a couple of weeks for a week. Oh gosh, I wish it was a month. That'd be amazing. So I'm actually taking my first like real proper vacation, I feel like, since COVID. So I'm very excited about that. And professionally, I'm excited about our direction as a company, meaning, I feel like sales is ready to start to go through changes, and we've been ready to be at that forefront when people were ready. And so I think what I'm excited for is just where sales is headed as a profession. I think sales is going to become more respected because I think the skills that it's going to be required to be successful when you have a more informed buyer, when people already understand the basics and sales becomes about being a guide and truly being consultative, is whenever I think sales is really going to hit its kind of golden era where we've got this technology to eliminate a lot of the mundane. And then we can focus on really rich project management, super deep customer experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you want to get better at right now?
What do I want to get better at now? Getting back to a workout routine. Okay. I think like a lot of people, it's, the not having the normal sense to return. I'm in the office right now, but I don't come in very often. So that's me, is doing a little bit more self-care. That would be the one thing I want to get better at right now.
You're the second person in a row that I talked to that had that answer. Sure, I think it's a
trend, man.
Yeah, exactly. It's a trend. What keeps you motivated?
Belief that we're doing good work, belief that we're making an impact and showing results, and that I'm building a company that's focused on really just driving results and not just charging people money. That we're not just focused on, assessments like a lot of consulting firms are really focused on, from our work, what's the outcomes. And I think being focused and hearing the feedback and seeing the results, that keeps me pretty fired up.
I think I read on one of your posts is that you said something about consuming 150 books in a year. I don't know, something like that. Does that resonate with you? Because this was my last question.
Listen to this. So I did the worst sarcastic post of all time. Like, I think that this is the post. No, I read probably, how many books do I read a year? Let's just say I average 2 to 3 a month, probably. Okay. So I probably read like 50 a month, or 50, maybe like 30 to 40 a year. But no, I did a very sarcastic post. It was about my like fake routine. I was like, yeah, this year I read 150 books, listened to 452 podcasts. And I even got in the video, I filmed it selfie style. I got into my car. I said, yep, got to head to the office. I drove around my cul-de-sac, pulled back into my garage, and went up to my home office. And only a sliver of people understood that it was like I was like making fun of what you just said, the morning routine thing, where people were like, oh, my morning routine, like I get up at 5 a.m., I meditate for an hour, etc. But apparently I was like too realistic about it. So it went like 20% of people got it.
That is so funny. I love it. Well, so that was question number 5. This is, what's your preference for consuming information? Books, podcasts?
I like books. And I tell you what, man, lately I've been consuming a lot of information on Clubhouse.
Yes.
I've been popping into rooms here or there. Again, like this director of operations, getting feedback from like amazing COOs, marketing, hopping in an SEO room, getting up on SEO, digital, I just get into a room where I've got a whole play that I run. I get into a room on Clubhouse, I immediately raise my hand. I don't even know what the topic is. The thing says SEO, whatever. I'm like,
right.
I want to learn. And so I've just been being very proactive on Clubhouse, and I feel like I'm getting thousands and thousands of dollars worth of advice on areas for free. I'm also giving a lot of advice too on the areas where I'm strong, but I love it. And then I can flip to another channel, and Coolio is freestyling with the game. And then another one, you've got like last night on my drive home, it was Jermaine Dupri and Tyrese talking about the music industry. And
wow.
That's what I'm into with Clubhouse. I mean, Clubhouse is like, I can go and I can talk work, and then I can go, hear Coolio freestyling. And Coolio proclaimed himself the best rapper out of Compton. It's like, come on, dude.
Wow.
That's right. Wow. Compton Coolio. Maybe. I don't know, man.
They should have kicked him out of that room just for that. I was listening to Jermaine Dupri this morning, actually. That's pretty funny.
Were you really?
Yeah, Money Ain't a Thing, him and Jay-Z. That's pretty funny. Wow. Yeah, same thing. Clubhouse. I'm all about it. I'm gonna start following you because I don't think I am.
Should, man. Yeah.
Start following you for sure.
Now I'm gonna listen to that song. That feels like I want to do that shoulder shimmy, like
that's right. Money ain't a thing. Exactly. Yeah. That's right. Over quota ain't a thing. Jake, thank you so much for sharing this time with me and for going over quota.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Go out, make it happen.
Goodbye, everyone. Cue in the music.